this is really what I'm coming back with after like a year and a half. Here we go, I guess. Go to test the new mic. Look, I've been subscribed to Dunkey for a long time. Like a long time. I like Dunkey, and I like his videos. Maybe not as much as I used to, but obviously I have nothing against him personally. But if you've been watching him for as long as I have, you probably noticed a pretty significant shift his channel started making around 2015. I don't even really have to make this point.
Number 7, Neck. Shovel Knight wasn't the hardest game I played this year. Fucking kidding. But it is so damn fun. The music, the level design, the characters.
It's clear that what he's most interested in nowadays is serious games critique, which is entirely his right. But where it gets dicey to me is a video he released recently at time of writing on Octopath Traveler. And I think me being a gigantic dork who's been watching his videos for so long is why it gets on my nerves. His video is pretty harsh on the game. I don't think anyone clicked on a Dunkey video about a turn-based anime JRPG and expected him to have glowing praise for it. As a disclaimer, I haven't played Octopath Traveler, and I don't really plan to. It doesn't seem like my kind of game, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. My issue with the video in question isn't that he bashes the game, but more so that he does it in a way that goes against everything he seems to believe about games criticism. And I think that issue has been creeping its way into his reviews for a long time now. And with my massive total of just 2 videos, clearly I'm in a great position to go around criticizing other critics. First, I'm just going to go down a list of his points in this particular video, then move on to his critical videos in general.
If you're gonna subject me to some cringe-worthy PS2 era anime writing, at least hit me with an interesting concept. Daffy Duck meets Wreck-It Ralph. Okay, I'll play that. Pokemon meets Inception. Okay, that sounds pretty fun. So what makes Octopath Traveler stand out? You can have 8 characters. Not at a time, mind you, and goddamn are these the most generic, uninteresting characters you can whip up. Depending on your character, the dialogue can be bland and inoffensive, or just a complete fucking embarrassment.
Here's the template for everything Dunkey says in the video. Something which I agree with on the surface, but which really doesn't mean anything when you dig further into it. Again, let me make sure we're all on the same page here.
But you know what's dumber than RPGs? Anime. Unless we're talking this guy, you need to get this bullshit out of my face.
Look, Dunkey, man, I don't care much for anime either. I've been in the weeaboo trenches and lived to tell about it, man. You don't need to tell me why localized anime dialogue can be pretty shitty. Trust me, I know this. But part of being a games critic is understanding and acknowledging that there are viewpoints outside your own. Let's take a look at this clip again.
It's also important to acknowledge your shortcomings as a reviewer. Mine personally is that I have no fucking patience at all. Pretty much throw any RPG at me, I'm just gonna say, nah, that's boring.
This is a good admission to make. Letting your audience know that you, as an individual, don't have a taste for a genre before reviewing something in that genre is great. I've done the same thing. I'll admit straight away that I'm not much for cover shooters. I've always found them dull and samey. Oh god, please don't watch that video. You know that you don't like this style of writing, and you knew going into the game that that's what it is. So why are you presenting this part of the video as fact without evidence or disclaimer? The reality is, not everyone on Earth has seen your Game Critics video. When you title your video nothing but Octopath Traveler, making it the highest viewed video that shows up right there in someone's face if they're just searching the game up, even on Google alone, you need to realize that people who've never heard of you are going to be watching your video. I'm sorry, but a quick cut, less than 4-minute video where you leave out important information like I don't like anime and I especially don't like RPGs when reviewing an anime style RPG, you have to understand that you're broadcasting the image that what you say is just true by default. And no, this doesn't count as evidence for an argument.
Your Excellency?
I know you are up to the task.
Your Excellency,
I had a dream.
A dream, Your Excellency?
Promise me that you will love one another forever.
Your Excellency,
Shut the fuck up!
This is... I don't even really know what this is. I feel like it's an exaggerated joke, like it's clear to anyone watching that he's cutting out big chunks of dialogue to emphasize his annoyance at the dialogue, but it's all he presents for why the dialogue is bad. I asked directly this time, why is a review of what I understand to be a 50-hour-long RPG less than 4 minutes long? Is it not irresponsible as a critic trying to establish himself as better than the average IGN fodder to present arguments this way?
On top of all that, you have my two favorite things in any video game. Whoever made random encounters should be kicked into a fucking pit of spice and shot with a bazooka. Why would you put this in any game?
For years, I've asked myself that question.
It's not even that I particularly despise turn-based combat, it's just that it's almost always accompanied by hundreds of horrible, brainless fights. A lot of games will throw easily dispatchable enemies at you. The difference is, you see a grunt, boom, dead. You see that Goomba, boom, gone. Now let's fight a level 1 snail in Octopath Traveler.
Have at you! Have at you! The thrill of the fight!
Okay, now do that 50 times and you can fight the next boss.
This is where I take the most issue with this video. This is where a lack of understanding of game design and history hurts Dunkey as a critic the most, when he's trying to draw comparisons between what he does and does not like. And before I go off on this long-ass tangent about the merits of both random encounters and turn-based combat, let me again clarify. I'm not like JRPG guy over here. I like Shin Megami Tensei games and that's about it. But if you asked me before I ever played those games what I thought of random encounters, I'd probably agree with Dunkey, because their execution in most RPGs isn't great. Regardless, let's get into this. On a basic level, all RPGs are descended from Dungeons & Dragons way back in the 70s. The game had to be played on pen and paper, which necessitated turn-based combat. You can't exactly make snap decisions when every single action requires dice rolls, character sheets, and so on. A basic action like swinging your sword in D&D has several steps to be accounted for, it can't be rushed. Just the same, video game RPGs have a lot of menus and math to be thought out, so they're typically turn-based. Even active time battle systems like Final Fantasy VI have cooldown timers in which the player is given a chance to think their moves out before they act.
There's also chess.
D&D also popularized Fog of War, the areas of the game map which can't be seen until player character steps into them. This is to build mystery, to make sure the players are on their toes and feeling the tension of creeping around corners that may have enemy encounters around them. It's a balancing force still used today, primarily in strategy games, but it's also implicit in a lot of games. First-person shooters inherently limit how much the player can see, making situational awareness just as important as visual awareness. Random encounters come from early digital RPGs attempting to replicate this same tension, the same possibility of monsters being around every corner. Some games, namely Western RPGs like Baldur's Gate, based directly on D&D, had static enemy placements that stayed dead permanently. You can see the same thing in a modern game of the same style like Pillars of Eternity. But that trend didn't start until around the 90s, and before that were games like the Wizardry series, games packed with random encounters. Japanese RPGs took from that stock, having encounters happen semi-randomly based on an algorithm which randomly generates a number with each step. If that number falls into a small pool of encounter numbers, a battle starts. This system has a good few benefits. First and foremost, it means the player is permanently aware of whether or not they're in danger. In most RPGs with this system, it goes like this. Are you in town? You're safe. Not in town? You're not safe. It's a boon in a lot of ways. This incredibly clear line between when the player is and is not safe. On a subversive level, it also allows the developers to pull the rug out from underneath the player, making a seemingly safe area dangerous to mount up some tension. SMT has like a religious hatred for safe zones anywhere outside of save rooms. You've got to watch out for enemies even when you're just walking between shops, and they can jack you up if you're not careful. That is the purpose of random encounters, to keep the player permanently on their toes when they know a battle could come at any time. This is magnified when resource management is added in. Again, going back to D&D, the game naturally builds tension as dungeon crawls go on and the party slowly loses resources. Health, healing potions, limited spell casts, arrows, ropes, torches, all that. All those things and their finite nature make the party weaker as the enemies get stronger, stretching that tension and forcing the party to think strategically as they move further into a dungeon crawl. Is this fight hard enough to spend a healing potion on, or should I save it? Could there be a secret in this room that my last torch will show, or will I just attract enemies? Should I blow my last cast of magic missile now, or is the dungeon boss right around the corner? These are the things that encounters the player can't see coming and resource management add to a game. Random encounters are just a virtualized variation on the same principles. The reason Dunkey and many others, including myself, dislike JRPGs in general is this. They're usually just too fucking easy. When resource management doesn't mean anything, and when enemy encounters don't mean anything because the player can just spam basic attacks, when there's baby mode, safe spots, and healing shrines or whatever scattered too liberally throughout a dungeon, it loses all of that tension. That is when random encounters become a boring slog, especially with turn-based combat. Especially when that combat has overlong 3D Final Fantasy style animations. It's been a running joke since Final Fantasy VII, characters taking 45 seconds to cast their big super moves. And like I said, I haven't played Octopath Traveler. Maybe it is way too easy. Maybe the animations are way too long. Maybe it's guilty of every JRPG sin that exists. But I don't know how on earth I'm supposed to glean that from a video that's not even 4 minutes long and shows exactly one single fight for more than a few seconds in that time. This is where I bring it full circle back to Dunkey. Because the problem is, Dunkey doesn't seem to understand any of this. He criticizes the basic fights as brain dead without understanding the issue on a fundamental level. He just attributes it to the entire concept of random encounters mixing with turn-based combat. He hasn't stopped to consider why random encounters exist in the first place.
Whoever made random encounters should be kicked into a fucking pit of spice and shot with a bazooka. Why would you put this in any game?
Obviously he's making a joke here, but he still just doesn't understand the purpose of the mechanic he's talking about, and he's bashing an entire game based off of that misunderstanding. And you're allowed to not like random encounters. For every positive I listed in favor of random encounters, there's an equally valid negative to be argued. But Dunkey isn't arguing negatives, he's arguing personal taste.
You don't have to see eye to eye on every single game to put your trust in someone, obviously. A critic's power lies in the consistency of their voice.
You're right, Dunkey, we don't have to see eye to eye. But we do have to be arguing at the same level of understanding, or else this is just me sitting here trying to tell you that the developers of Octopath Traveler are not deranged idiots for putting random encounters in their game. Every mechanic has its time and place. If you look at a game mechanic which has been around since before you were born, you need to consider it further than your own personal taste before dismissing it as a horrible idea at the core. I'm just trying to hold you to your own standard for games criticism here, man. And this is where I have to show my hand. This video rubbed me the wrong way for a lot of reasons, but I could really only say so on an uninformed level at first. Again, I have not played Octopath Traveler. I took issue with the basic idea of Dunkey reviewing an anime-style JRPG in the first place, considering...
Unless we're talking this guy, you need to get this bullshit out of my face.
Was not present at the time as some kind of disclaimer in the video itself. And then I actually looked into the game a bit, and I find... yeah. So let me give a rundown of what I've come to understand about Octopath from even just cursory glances at the reactions to the video. First, the game has a weakness system like most JRPGs. That symbol over the snail he's fighting means the enemy is weak to daggers and will have its defense broken if hit by one. The symbol being there at all means Dunkey has discovered it by the time of this footage and is choosing not to use that information. Second, by the point Dunkey has reached in this clip, he should have a full party. In combat, that means 4 total members. Yet he's purposely removed every member except the character who doesn't use daggers, just to elongate the fight. Third, the damage he's doing is unusually low regardless, meaning he most likely unequipped his best equipment just so he'd be doing less damage. Fourth, he didn't show any footage past the first chapter of the game, in a game with 32 chapters. He also made no reference to the fast travel system unlocked later on, which obviously reduces the number of battles, and a mechanic in the game which allows the player to reduce the number of battles permanently, which means he probably never reached the point those mechanics were introduced at all. And I learned all of this from YouTube comments and Google searching.
Why is my opinion more valid than this guy's? Well, first off, I actually completed the fucking game. This dude got halfway through the game and put his review up. What the fuck? The best reviews are entirely subjective, but that doesn't mean you throw objectivity out the window. You have to build your case with honest statements that even someone who disagrees with you could relate to.
Dunkey busted.
I'm sorry, Dunkey, but what the fuck is this? Come on, man. Come on. You know this shit. These are your standards. And please, anyone who wants to say, it's not a review, that's why it doesn't say Dunkview in the title, please just don't.
Bulletproof Software presents Hatris. It's like Tetris with hats. What the fuck? 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 What the heck? Out of 5.
He could take down the video right now, slap a 2 out of 5 on the end, and repost it as a Dunkview and no one would know the difference. He did this same shit with Splatoon 2. He knows his arguments are unsupported and he knows he'll catch shit if he puts a bad score on a game people like. If you can watch this video and enjoy it for the jokes without being irritated by the intellectual dishonesty, then more power to you. But I remember shit like this.
And then you have this fucking shitty rat race to be the first review on Metacritic so that your dumbass website can get more traffic, and the end result is a column of weak-ass first impressions.
Right now, the music comes out like this.
Right.
People are writing a review in a day. First of all, you can't listen to an album and rate it in a day. It's just impossible.
This dude got halfway through the game and put his review up. What the fuck?
See, the difference is, that GameSpot reviewer actually disclosed that he didn't finish the game. When IGN slaps together a first impressions article, they call it a review in progress. If you're going to hold professional critics to a higher standard, you have to at least meet their standards first. I might have trouble calling these people critics, but they've at least got the professional part down. Now we get to the part of the video where I talk about Dunkey's game critiques as a whole. They're bad. They're real bad.
As always, God of War is a ridiculous, over-the-top thrill ride with unmatchable scale and a thunderous, menacing orchestral score drowning out sounds of the carnage on screen. We find Kratos living as a mortal in the land of Midgard, which is enveloped in this ethereal fog and adorned by sunken monuments to the gods. As you play, you discover these shrines depicting the history and future of this forsaken place as its scope gradually expands. God of War is a masterful balancing act. It plunges you into its desolate, treacherous realms of Norse mythology and is punctuated by raw, satisfying combat. There are powerful, quiet moments sandwiched between jaw-dropping spectacle, and it ends on such a ooh moment where you can't wait to see what happens next.
I'm sorry, but does this qualify as a review? How much of this 5-minute video is spent on adjective-laden hyperbole, which ultimately doesn't mean anything other than I like it?
Let's talk about the combat. It is brutal. There is such a satisfying weight behind your moves in this game. You can split a dude in half with your charge-up attack, throw your axe into a guy, freeze him, then kick him into a wall and shatter him into 100 pieces. When you hit triangle, your weapon will fly back into your hand like Thor's hammer. You have these crazy ass special attacks. You can turn your rage mode on and knock dudes around like little bowling pins.
This isn't what critiquing is. Reviewing God of War is not listing off all the cool shit you saw in the game. How is the combat balanced? How deep is the combat? Is it better than old God of War? Is it worse? What could be improved? What's good about it mechanically? How does it all flow? Who will this type of combat appeal to? I know Dunkey is a comedy guy. I know he's not intending to be a professional critic. But I'm sorry, there is no purpose whatsoever in reviewing a game if you're not going to review the game. You don't have to be Joseph Anderson making 4-hour reviews of Uncharted, but you do have to put in the minimum amount of effort required to explain why something is good.
I just want to start us off by saying that the best way to fail as a critic is to suggest that something's perfect without fully explaining why.
George Weidman, aka Super Bunny Hop, aka Our Lord and Savior, did a 15-minute review of Pillars of Eternity 2, a game that is anywhere from 40 to 70 hours long. And it's a good review. It gave me a grasp on the game's strengths and weaknesses, to the point that I picked up the first Pillars of Eternity after seeing it despite rarely being into CRPGs, because a perspective on the second game actually informed me on the first game as well. You can make a good, short review of a long game. You could even make a good 4-minute review of Octopath Traveler, but that's not what Dunkey did, because he's just not a good critic. And now for the part of the video everyone wanted to see, me getting mad about Dunkey's bad opinion. I am...
PS3 version. It's kind of
Please
put off, like washed out grass.
Come on, man.
This is power.
This doesn't count as evidence. And then you move on to the next guy. All I have written here is groan loudly, and Wind Waker was better asshole.
And it deserves a perfect score by modern standards.
Also, wait, he didn't mention a single fucking mechanic in Ocarina of Time before calling it a perfect game. Holy shit!